All right, welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. We get into a lot of different topics here, but I got to say, today's is pretty universal.
It really is.
Families.
Yeah.
And everyone's got one.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about, the typical nuclear family or anything like that. We are diving deep into all the different ways families work and some of the rules, some of the fun facts, some of the things that make a family a family. And we're going to use this source material called Rules and Fun Facts About the Family, which is kind of a fascinating document.
It is. It's a really interesting collection of, well, as you said, rules and fun facts, but also questions that really make you think about, how families function and how they've evolved over time.
Yeah, that's one of the things that jumped out at me right away. And I'll throw this one at you. It says here that the word family originally referred to servants of a household.
That's right. Not to the actual relatives.
Not relatives.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a shift in meaning, right?
It is. It makes you realize how much our concept of family has changed. Back then, it was very much tied to the idea of a household and who lived under one roof. Okay. But now...
And who was working.
Exactly. And who was working. But today, it's so much broader than that.
It is broader than that. So, okay, if the very definition of family has changed, what about the so-called rules? I mean, this source material lays out a whole bunch of these rules for a successful family. Some of them seem pretty obvious, like mutual respect and communication, but how do those ideas actually play out in a modern family?
That's the key question, isn't it? Because those rules are timeless, but the way we apply them has to change with the times. For example, think about communication.
Right.
It used to be a lot simpler, right? Face-to-face, maybe a phone call. Now we've got social media, texting, video chat.
On these devices, yeah.
It's constant, and it can be overwhelming. So mutual respect and communication today, it also means respecting digital boundaries.
Yeah, like putting the phone down.
Exactly. Making sure family time isn't constantly interrupted by notifications. Maybe you have a no phones at dinner rule or designate specific times for device-free connection. It's about finding what works for your family, but being intentional about it.
Being intentional. I like that. I like that a lot. Now, another rule that the source talks about is shared responsibility. And I'm curious, from your perspective, is that something that applies across the board? Because these days we're talking about so many different family structures, nuclear families, single-parent households, blended families, you name it.
Absolutely. Shared responsibility is crucial in any family dynamic. It's about everyone feeling like they contribute to the family's well-being, regardless of the family's specific makeup.
So it doesn't really matter if there's one parent or two, or even if there are grandparents living in the house.
Right. It's about finding ways for everyone to pitch in, to feel valued. In a single-parent household, maybe the kids help more with chores or meal prep. In a multi-generational home, maybe older siblings mentor younger ones. It's all about teamwork.
Teamwork. Makes sense. It reminds me of that fun fact in the source about elephant families. Did you see that one?
Yeah, or the older elephants guide the younger ones.
Yeah, it's like they have their own built-in mentorship program, right?
Exactly, and it shows that some aspects of family dynamics are actually pretty universal.
Across species, even.
Even across species. It reinforces this idea that families are ultimately units of learning and support, and that kind of parental authority and guidance, whatever form it takes, is super important.
Well, speaking of learning, there's another interesting tidbit in here, and this one's really for the parents listening. The source mentions that eating together as a family can actually lead to better academic performance in kids. I mean, could it really be that simple?
Well, it's probably not just about the act of eating itself, but more about the quality time spent together. Think about it. Regular family dinners create this space for conversation. You're sharing stories, ideas. It's a chance for kids to build their vocabulary, practice communication skills, maybe even learn about different perspectives.
So like a nightly dose of family bonding and brain power all in one.
Exactly. And it's something you can easily integrate into your routine, even if it's just once or twice a week. Making that conscious effort to sit down together can make a big difference.
Even if it's just grabbing takeout and sitting around the table for 20 minutes, right?
Absolutely. And it ties back to that idea of adaptability we talked about earlier. Family routines, like meal times, they need to evolve as children grow up. Maybe it's not always dinner, maybe it's breakfast or a weekend brunch. The key is consistency and intention, making that time for each other.
That makes a lot of sense. And, speaking of evolution, the source also mentions how different cultures influence family dynamics. And it really got me thinking, with all the technological changes happening around us, how do you see families adapting in the future?
That's a big question, and I think it's one that we're all figuring out as we go along. But I think the key will be for families to be really intentional about how they use technology, to
Yeah,
set boundaries, to define priorities, to ask themselves, what role do we want technology to play in our family life? How do we make sure it enhances our connections rather than detracts from them?
those are really important questions to consider. So as we wrap up our deep dive into families today, what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's that families are constantly changing, evolving, adapting, but the core principles, things like communication, respect, adaptability, those remain essential. And by focusing on those principles, by actively working to apply them in our own unique family situations, we can build stronger, more resilient families no matter what challenges we face.
I love that. Focusing on the core principles. And remember, like those elephant families, there's so much wisdom to be shared and so much support to be found within that family unit. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.